Okay, so before we delve deeper into the Three.js code, I want to install another useful tool called the dat.gui. And in the Three.js examples, you will see that it's this menu that appears in the top right where you can interact with the 3D model and the scene. We're going to add this to our project, and we'll see that at the top right, and then we'll be able to have a GUI for interacting with our own project as well. So open the code, and in the Three.js library in node modules under libs, there's also a file called dat.gui.module.js. We'll create a reference to that. So here, client TS, import GUI from JSM libs dat.gui.module, like so. Now, we didn't get a type definition file with dat.gui module, so we should install one. And to do that, you can type npm install add types dat.gui. Okay, very good. And our IDE hasn't yet found the type definition file because it's still showing these three dots down here. Could not find a declaration file. So what we'll do is copy it and put it into this folder. So if I go up to node types up here and just refresh that, there'll be one for dat.gui. There it is. Now we'll just copy that d.ts there. Copy that. Bring that down to libs, paste, which is Control V, and we'll rename it being dat.gui.module.d.ts, like so. Now if we go back into client and press F1, restart TS server. Okay, that's now found the type definition file because those three dots are no longer appearing. And you may be wondering why I'm using curly braces here and not using them on stats. That's because in the stats module, there is a default export declared of stats. In the dat.gui module, there isn't. So just to show you, if I look at the definition for stats there, down here it says export default stats. So that's what's going on there. And with the GUI module, go to definition, there is no default export. There's several exports, but no default export. So that's why we declare which class we're going to use in these curly braces. It's the same thing with orbit controls. There was no default export. Anyway, let's create this GUI. So I'm just going to copy that. Down here after stats, const GUI equals the new GUI. Okay, and since that will be passed to the client JS, we should tell our server what that means. So down here at server, let's add a new row for that. So app use libs dat.gui module will point to libs dat.gui.module.js, and that will be returned to the client. Let's refresh that. Okay, so we get a control, a little GUI at the top. We haven't given it any controls or properties to modify yet. Let's do that now. Okay, down here in GUI, we can go GUI.add, simply add the target object being the cube dot rotation. Rather than modifying the rotation in the animate loop, we can actually modify the rotation in our GUI. So we'll do that. So comma, the X property name, prop name. Let's just see what that looks like for now. F5. Okay, so we have one thing here and we can actually change that. We can also add a minimum and a maximum number, so min and max. I'll use 0 for the minimum, and I'll use math.pi times 2 for the max. That's in radians. Rotation needs radians, and math pi times 2 is the same as 360 degrees. So let's have a look at that. Refresh. Okay, so we've now got a slider and the rotation's much better. And we're rotating on the x-axis there. And here we have an integer. Let's convert that to a float simply by saying what the step should be. And if I just do 0.01 being a step, F5, there we go. It's a float now. Okay, so that's an example of creating one control inside the dat.gui, and we're now using that to interact with one of the objects in our scene. And to show you that it's not hard to add a few more, X, Y, and Z. F5. There we go. There's Y, there's Z, and there's X. So when looking at this example, we also get these little drop-down things here they're called folders. So let's just add some folders now. So to do that, you'd say const cube folder equals GUI.add folder with a property name being string, so cube. And rather than saying GUI.add for your control, you'd say cubefolder.add, 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 and refresh that. There we go. We got a folder for cube, and it's closed by default. We can open that by default by saying cubefolder.open. Okay, so now it's open by default, and we can have multiple folders. For example, I can say camera folder. I can call it camera, and I can say camera folder dot add camera dot position Z, also with some minimum and maximum constraints, so 0 and the maximum number being 10, and a step 0.1. And we'll open the camera folder as well. F5, camera. There we go, the camera. We're now moving the camera Z axis. Now that's just a very quick introduction to the dat.gui. It's actually very useful. We can use it to do many things like even change colors. Now that will allow us to make our next lessons even more interactive.